Okay, not that anybody was actually anxiously anticipating this. Not that anybody was sitting for the last 21 hours saying to themselves, I can't wait for Query and Company because of blank. Because the Colts are getting ready for a big showdown in Pittsburgh on Sunday. That we know. The voice of the Colts, Matt Taylor, is going to join us on the show today. That we know. Usually we do that on Thursdays. There were, I thought, personally, maybe I'm off base, more names on the Colts injury report from yesterday of players that sat out, probably mostly precautionary, than I had anticipated. We'll go over that today. That we knew. Purdue had an exhibition last night against University of Indianapolis and got better play from one center and okay play from another. That I figured we'd discuss. Butler got an exhibition yesterday, right? Indiana State playing yesterday. There was plenty to unpack, and then obviously and you don't know which way to go with it, angle on the Pacers in terms of, are we panicking because they're winless, or do we say, well, I mean, they're going out there and they're basically playing at the hyper? I personally feel it's the latter. And Aaron Nesmith, who, again, you know, I'm going to buy a pair of Aaron Nesmith shoes. I don't know where I'll ever wear them because they're bright yellow, and unless you're playing in the NBA for a team that has yellow in them, it looks a little odd to be wearing those just walking around doing your mall walking, which I do now in my senior years. But you know, we could talk about Nesmith and his shooting and the fact that he's struggling, and last night you still had an opportunity, and the resiliency. There's a yin and yang of the way you can break down the Pacers, which we'll do as well. We can talk about the fact that now in week 9 of my super fandom, my reawakening of my fandom for the Toronto Blue Jays, here they are right on the cusp. And I was thinking about going to Toronto this weekend. Let's go. Just driving 8 hours one way. Let's go. And soaking it all in. We were going to go over all of those as potential leads, and mostly we were going to do today, Eddie, the fact that with all of that, we were going to bring it all together because yesterday, and I don't even remember how it came about. Oh, I do know now. We were discussing the fact that 2008 was the last time the Colts won in Pittsburgh. The last time that the Colts went to Pittsburgh and silenced the terrible towels was 2008.
Yep.
So that led to you playing songs from 2008 over the course of the show with each time that we came back. Mm-hmm. And I asked you how old you were. You said 10. And I said, man, it is amazing because if you look at songs from when I was 10, it is just hit after hit after hit in 1982. And I said, maybe we should do that tomorrow, meaning today. But do you happen to have the breaking news sounder? I'm making the executive decision today that here's what we're going to do, because we're going to do it to bring to attention what is, I think, a pretty big story and certainly an interesting one. The news coming out today from basically ESPN. Adam Schefter had it. Stephen Holder, I know, was working alongside with him, that Jim Irsay's daughters announced that they will be selling the Jim Irsay collection. This is a collection not just of guitars. I think that we think of guitars. But what we're going to do today to show and to illustrate how big the Jim Irsay collection is. Each song that we will play over the course of today is something that is on display within the Jim Irsay collection. Whether it be a guitar that was used in Paperback Writer by the Beatles, whether it be a song that, you know, maybe he has the script of the lyrics of a song, whether it be a song that relates to a historical reference of something. Everything that we play will have something to do with the Jim Irsay collection. And I bring this up because I turned on this radio show thinking this guy's going to be talking about the Colts and instead he's talking about guitars. I get it. But I do think that there is an element of all of this that goes in that is interesting, and let me explain. The Jim Irsay collection, And all of what I'm about to say, I take as a positive. None of this is in any way, shape, or form a negative. And I don't know it to be fact, but I've got a pretty good idea, an assumption, which can be dangerous, admittedly. But Jim Irsay was, without question, an eccentric individual. And there are two ways to be eccentric. It's kind of like the movie Hoosiers. And I'm paraphrasing, but when he says to Norman Dale, when George says to Norman Dale, there's two kinds of crazy. One is a guy that runs around naked and barks at the moon, and the other is a guy that does it in my yard. And he says, the second one I'm kind of forced to deal with. Eccentricities can come with just making someone unique, and then it can come with at the cost of something. Jim Irsay's eccentricities, he gets all the credit in the world, and I've loved this about him, even though it wasn't like I was deep friends with the guy, met him, was around him a little bit. But I think what is to be celebrated about Jim Irsay, and we talked about it upon his passing, but he managed to take his eccentricities and his unique interest and capabilities to accumulate them, and he managed to do it to share with the world. And a lot of us will go and say, hey, I was in Lubbock, Texas, so I went when I was in Lubbock and asked people, like, where are the houses that Buddy Holly grew up? There's a difference between that and, hey, I had an interest in the house that Buddy Holly grew up, and so I bought it so that I could preserve it, and the rest of humanity could then understand and appreciate Buddy Holly the same level that I do. I think all of us have a desire to be able to share with the world and allow the world to embrace the things that are of cultural importance and significance and preserving them. And I applaud Jim Irsay 100 times over for the fact that it's one thing to say, you know what, I think it's kind of cool to own a guitar that Prince played. And it's another to say, I think a guitar that Prince played is really cool, and it would be a shame if it ends up going somewhere where someone doesn't appreciate it. So I want to make sure that it is preserved so that people can then years from now look at it and understand and appreciate who Prince was, who George Harrison was, who Ringo Starr was, who Jack Kerouac was, who Hunter S. Thompson was, who Eric Clapton was, why Muhammad Ali knocking out Sonny Liston was of importance, why, the different sports things that are involved. So, all of that to be said, I think Jim Irsay had this ability to take things that were of interest to him, that were off of the beaten path, and instead of being somebody that had wandered off the beaten path and having people be able to say, look at this guy, he's off in the bushes, off the beaten path, while the rest of humanity is staying along the hiking trail. Instead, he was able to say, it's because there are incredibly unique bushes along this beaten path that have beautiful flowers that the most of the world would not see. So I'm going to actually bring this bush and put it now here on the hiking trail so that the rest of people can see and appreciate it. And upon his passing, we knew and speculated as to what the future of the Jim Irsay collection would be. And there were many people that said this is something that should go into a museum in, say, Indianapolis or Los Angeles, which was very close to him, or Chicago where he'd lived, or Dallas where he went to college. Any number of different cities would have been likely candidates to be a permanent housing display for the things that he had accumulated and all of those beautifully flowered bushes that he brought back into the hiking trail for the rest of us. So this news today, you can jump to a million different conclusions. But I really do think, I'm not saying factually, but I really do think it comes down to this. Jim Irsay was not a fool. And Jim Irsay loved football. He loved it. But he loved life and its eccentricities and its sprinkles for certain. And I think that Jim Irsay knew, if you look at most teams in the National Football League, the Carolina Panthers, The Carolina Panthers ownership group, that money was like, hedge funds or mutual funds or whatever. The Dallas Cowboys. Jerry Jones accumulated wealth through the oil industry. The Cleveland Browns. The family of the Cleveland Browns ownership group, the primary owners are I think it's Flying J and Pilot gas stations. So most ownership groups have a revenue stream above and beyond their football franchise. Jim Irsay and the Irsay family, from a business standpoint, the Indianapolis Colts were the business. Yes, Bob Irsay had accumulated his wealth through warehousing, I believe, in Chicago. I always forget if it's warehousing or like AC, HVAC stuff in units, but I think it was warehousing. But either way, Bob Irsay had an accumulated wealth that allowed him to purchase the Los Angeles Rams and then make a franchise swap for the Baltimore Colts, and then ultimately move the Baltimore Colts to Indianapolis. But he was out of that game by the time he passed away, and therefore the family business was the Indianapolis Colts. Not hedge funds, not oil, not gas stations, not tech stuff. The family stream of revenue is the Indianapolis Colts. The reason that I'm bringing all this up is because I don't think it can be ruled out the possibility that Jim Irsay said, look, upon my passing, when there are inheritance taxes that need to be paid, and yes, I get it. People far smarter than I, far more detailed than I, far more legal than I would be able to come up with all kinds of trusts and inheritance and transfers and everything else to minimize the financial obligation that goes within an inheritance. I understand that. But nonetheless, you are still talking about, by the letter of the law, a tax that is going to be owed based on the federal valuation or estimation of what they believe the team to be worth. And unlike other franchises, there is not a different business revenue stream to tap into to pay that off. And say, you know what? We have the franchise. We want to keep the franchise. We owe 40% the valuation of the franchise, so we're going to dip into our Flying J money, or we're going to dip into, the money that was whatever it might be. Now, I'm sure there's money set aside. Don't get me wrong. My point being, is it possible, and I believe it is, that Jim Irsay, pretty smart cookie, said, you know what? I don't know how much time I have on this earth. I don't know how long I'll be here, but all of us begin to think about legacy. All of us begin to think about, like, what can we do for the generation below us? And so the Jim Irsay collection may well have been, this might have been the ultimate gift to his daughters, because he allowed the gift to his daughters to be a gift to the rest of us, because he said, I'm going to take the money that I have, use it to buy guitars and manuscripts and historical archives and autographs and sports memorabilia and all of that, and I'm going to, as long as I'm walking earth, going to allow for people to be able to see all of these unique things that are sprinkles of what makes life great and what makes culture relevant. And I'm going to do that because that then becomes the ultimate gift to my daughters, because when the time comes that I pass away and an inheritance tax is owed to the federal government for the franchise that I own, now I have allowed for a revenue stream for my daughters. And that is the side business, if you will, that he allowed all of us to enjoy while he was here, and then it serves its financial business purpose upon his passing. Now, with all of that said, yes, they are going to give a portion of it, not all, a portion of it to charity, which is wonderful. And that also speaks to Jim Irsay. I think the ability for the foresight to be able to perhaps take care of the obligations, the ability to be able to also financially be charitable with it, and the pass along to his daughters of something that alleviates what would have been otherwise a burden, all are great summaries of the man that Jim Irsay was. And I think that is a big part of the story of the Irsay collection going for sale. Now, there was rumor that it was at one time he was offered $1 billion, that's with a B, $1 billion for all that he accumulated. This was not like 7 guitars in his basement. even though I think a lot of people thought that. It was an unbelievably and is an unbelievably relevant and historic collection. The Pacers last night, Eddie, you were working the game, and that was one of those that, again, yin and yang. You can look at it and say they were so close, and they fought so hard, and they still had an opportunity at the end. They almost did Pacer-like things. Pacer-like things would be like last year, Cleveland, New York, all of Oklahoma City for that matter.
Minnesota.
Well, Minnesota was the game where they were shorthanded, but I mean in terms of snatching victory from the jaws of defeat, right?
That was the Obi Toppin game when he went absolutely berserk and they went to overtime.
Yeah, and they were fueled by like this camaraderie, right? And this inspiration. But last night, I mean, in terms of we're going to get a missed free throw and we're going to immediately turn it into a three and like, here we go. Pacer-like things. And Aaron Nesmith, who I love, did not have a great shooting night. The problem is this. The problem is when you don't have Tyrese Halliburton and you don't have Obi Toppin and you don't have Benedict Mathurin and you no longer have Miles Turner and you don't have Andrew Nembhard, then when you do have a marquee mainline player, if they have an off night, there just is not the wealth to be spread elsewhere to pick up the slack, so to speak. We've all played pickup basketball. We've all had, I mean, hell, I shouldn't admit it, but the reality is this. On this show, Eddie, what did I tell you this morning when I came in? What's the one thing that I said happens to me about every 5 or 6 days? And I believe I made the noise of like, ugh.
Is it something about your medicine?
Yeah. So I have to take medicine every morning, right? And we all do it in some form or fashion. But so I take medicine every morning. One thing that I never know from one day to the next is how it will affect, just like being nauseous and sluggish and whatever else. About every, I don't know, I say 5 to 6. It's probably more like twice a month. There are probably 2 days a month where I take my medicine and then I'm just like, oh my gosh, like 20 minutes later, it feels like when you take a Centrum vitamin on an empty stomach and you're just like, ooh, I feel like I got off the tilt-a-whirl. So on those days, and any of us, you're a teacher, you're an architect, you're an attorney, whatever it might be. All of us have those days where you go into work and you just say to yourself, man, I'm going to lean on Jerry a little bit today because I don't feel well. Or, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you go ahead and help out with the Rosenstein files because I think I've got to head home early today. Everybody in work has those situations. At times on this show, I probably lean on you more than on other days, right? And that's what being a team is about. That's what being coworkers and colleagues is all about. And for Aaron Nesmith, when you have an off night, you just don't have the normalcy of the people that you lean on, the familiarity and the comfort to mask that a little bit, number one, but also to redistribute where things are going. Because does Aaron Nesmith really understand at this point the basketball tendencies of Mac McClung or vice versa? For that matter, even Jarris Walker in mainline minutes. And Walker last night didn't shoot the ball at the beginning of the game well, but he did other things well. But Jarris Walker, when it comes to playing extended minutes, is he used to, maybe more so than other players. But yet he's out on the floor with, does Ray J. Dennis really understand the tendencies of Jarris Walker? Jeff Rickard talked about this morning, and I think it's a very good point. It feels a little bit like a pickup game. And when I was in college and we would go to the Hyper, I always laughed about it because you would go to the Hyper at IU. J&V still goes there all the time, plays pickup ball, right? And you get 5 guys. You go out there and you're like, hey, you got next run. Okay, great. And 5 guys are just accumulated together. And then you get 5 dudes that you're like, who are these guys? And you find out that they're 5 guys that played together at LaPel High School 3 years ago and are now juniors in Indiana. They're out there running like organized sets. And you're like, I'm just out here to get some run. I don't know. This guy looks like he's a good player, and I'm going to dish to him, but I have no idea whether or not he is a good shooter from the outside. Obviously, the Pacers know who's good and who's not at shooting the ball and whatever else. But in terms of Nesmith is a good example. And Jeff made this point. It's a very good one. Aaron Nesmith, when he, as an outside shooter, he tends to square towards the basket more than, say, like a Reggie Miller did. Or for that matter, even a Halliburton. Halliburton likes to, if you notice, Tyrese Halliburton is not an off-curl catch-and-shoot shooter. He's an off-dribble shooter. Aaron Nesmith is I'm going to square in the corner and lower my body, and then his shot begins almost like mid-range in terms of his body positioning and then squaring himself up. And Andrew Nembhard understands that. A Tyrese Halliburton understands that. They have played with Nesmith enough that whether or not they have it like written down in a notebook, I don't know. But just on muscle memory alone, they know where and how Aaron Nesmith, for example, wants the basketball. And yes, they practice all the time. And yes, they go through like quote-unquote open gym all the time. But are we to assume or expect that Jay Huff out of the post knows that yet about Aaron Nesmith? That even a Quentin Jackson who has played, here and there, well, and I know he's hurt right now, but like Talon Peter, those things take time. And this particular roster in particular, heart goes so far. Camaraderie goes so far. But talent and tendency always typically end up winning out. And so therefore, Eddie, am I bothered by the fact that the Colts that the Pacers are off to the 0-4 start and that it's been, 36 years since they got off to this kind of a start? Am I bothered by it? Sure, I'd like to see a win, but I don't know that you can be overly complexed by it because of the fact of everything that's in play, right?
Second worst start in franchise history, Jake. You said it. 1988-1989 season was this
0-9?
Yeah, they started that year 0-9, and they're the first team to appear in the NBA Finals since the 1969-1970 Boston Celtics to open up the following season 0-4. But even if they are healthy, and I'm not talking about Tyrese Halliburton being healthy, but everyone else being healthy,
right?
The start of the stretch, I mean, it was still going to be challenging against Oklahoma City, and then a 3-game road trip featuring two teams that are going to be right there in the top of the Western Conference in Memphis and Minnesota, possibly. And then you've got Dallas just still trying to, piece together everything with Cooper Flagg and all the bigs that they have. They also have point guard issues. And I thought that was the real story of the game early. And the reason why the Pacers were able to get out to a double-digit lead in possess lead for the majority of the first half was the fact that they were aggressive defensively. They were forcing Dallas into turnovers. And I know it's early in the season, but the Pacers are last right now in the NBA in terms of turnovers forced. And so the fact that they were able to generate some easy looks offensively for a team that's going to be challenged right now until they can get a true point guard back in Andrew Nembhard to operate the offense, it's going to be a struggle for Indiana offensively. And in that second half, they just got away from being so aggressive defensively and getting into the passing lanes, deflections, creating turnovers for easy opportunities in transition to either get to the foul line, an open three, or to get to the basket for an easy layup.
Dallas has used at times. This shows you just the NBA in general and kind of the evolution of the game. And I'm not saying that it has worked for them to this point. But how about Cooper Flagg running the point? I'm not saying that's their primary, but they've experimented. Jason Kidd has tried that, right? I mean, You've got a 19-year-old 6'9" guy now that has come at cost. Cooper Flagg is a generational talent. And he's a young player who so probably not necessarily comparable to most players in the NBA. But it proves the point that, here's a guy that when they put him to run the point and distribute, it came at the cost of his on-floor shooting and his shooting percentage, especially if you go back 2 games ago. He had to adapt. And I think it just didn't work partially because of what I was talking about, understanding tendencies and muscle memory of other players on the floor. And last night, I think we saw that is still a work in progress for the Pacers. Again, they were out in Dallas is like some people call it the West. I call it the Southwest. But, when you start talking about people walking around wearing spurs and cowboy hats and riding horses. You think of it as the West, right? So we'll talk about what happened, quote, out West, at least in terms of the conference, and we'll do it with a guy who we know as East. Tony East joins us other side. We will get back into what happened last night and what happens moving forward. Atlanta now next on the schedule for Indiana. That is tomorrow night. We will take a road trip today as well, go to Pittsburgh, find out what the Colts have in store for them on Sunday when we talk Steelers with somebody that covers them, and Matt Taylor, the voice of the Colts, as well on this Irsay Collection Thursday. Query and Company on the Fan. guitar collection began when he was inspired by a guitar from 1972 and then decided that in 1983 he wanted guitars commissioned for him. That includes the Yellow Cloud, which is one that he had used on numerous occasions, including in the recording of the album of Purple Rain. The Yellow Cloud, one of the guitars that is now part of the Jim Irsay collection that will be up for sale. Different items of that we will talk about over the course of the show today, but let's go now to the Java House Peel and Pour guest line, where joining us now, he, of course, is the authority when it comes to talking about the Pacers and the Fever, for that matter. Locked On Pacers, Circle City Spin, and Forbes, amongst others, where you can see and hear Tony East along with this program. Tony, begin with this. I know last night was one that was, even with the struggles and even with the shorthanded nature of it, the Pacers still put themselves in position there towards the end. When you look at, in particular, their backcourt play and their lack of consistency of shooting from the outside, do you attribute that to, or how much do you attribute that to, just as we were talking about a moment ago, non-familiarity at this point of cohesiveness in terms of their offense, just because they have so many new faces out there?
Yeah, that and their, lineups that they probably never expected to play, certainly plays a part in the quality of shots they're creating, the openness of those shots. They've had a couple games this year where I don't walk away from it feeling like their offense was so awful or their ball movement was terrible, but then you look after last night and they had 20 assists against Dallas. That's so low for the way they play and the way that they hope to play. Now also, obviously, to get an assist, someone has to make a shot, and they couldn't make anything last night. But they haven't had quite the same connectivity, pop, whatever you want to call it, with their passing, whether that's due to player absences, whether that's due to chemistry with these new lineups. I think that's certainly part of it. But at the same time, we've seen all these individuals, even without Tyrese Halliburton available, be better at scoring and shooting than this, even in these kind of situations before. So I think last night was uniquely bad. It was the 70th time ever they've shot under 35% in franchise history, and it cost them because they easily could have won that game with a normal finishing day.
Tony, one of the things I thought about as I was watching the game last night, and it's a hard one to really pinpoint because Pascal Siakam always kind of looks fatigued. I don't mean that, you know what I mean? His body language is such that at times it looks laborious. But I remember when Siakam was up for contract and the discussion about, not a deep discussion, but there was discussion about his age versus that of a Tyrese Halliburton or an Aaron Nesmith, etc. And one of the real selling points about Siakam was he had not had the number of minutes or games played. He didn't have the mileage for his age in Toronto that other players may. Is there concern that this year is actually going to be too compounding on Siakam for everything timing-wise to work out in the back end of that contract?
Yeah, there should be. I mean, this is not a year to ride anybody a ton of minutes, right? You want to be cautious of what Pascal Siakam will be next year more than anything. And I get that they don't have a lot of available players and they need to play somebody. Siakam's at 36 minutes a game this year. That also includes a double overtime game. So it's probably closer to 34 if we're just talking in a regular game, and that'd be higher than any time he's had with the Pacers by over a minute and a half. He's obviously played more than that in the past with Toronto, but he's also 31 now, right? And turns, I believe, 32 during the season. So they have to be careful with the right balance of that and putting the right amount of miles on him. And I would have said that even before they were missing 8 of their 18 players, 9, the whole team basically. So that is certainly a concern. And it's crazy because you look and he's averaging 26 and 11 right now. I mean, he has done everything for this team besides make free throws this season. And they wouldn't even have a chance to win some of these games without him. But yet we walk away from them all talking about yeah, they did great, but is this too much? Do they need to find a better balance of Siakam? Because every team is doubling him right now because the Pacers can't do anything else. So not only is he playing a lot of minutes, 36 per game, those are the hardest minutes possible in terms of what it does to your mind and body. So they have to be cognizant of that, but they also have to win some games, and they haven't been able to do that yet because of how banged up they are, especially behind him. They don't have Topper anymore either.
What's your level of concern over the length of the Toppin injury?
It has to be a big one. I mean, now, so I don't know what we'll view in retrospect as the injury that was like the final straw of this is too many. I personally felt that way about Matherin a little bit, but Toppin might be the answer to some because now they have 6 of their top 8 from last year unavailable, right? One of them is on the Milwaukee Bucks and the other 5 are hurt. And Toppin was, a bench player who just found a way to fit with everybody, right? When he came to the Pacers, everybody thought, oh, he's going to be a great fit with Halliburton. And what made him great for the Pacers actually was he fit with everybody. And now he fits with nobody because he can't play. And their bench unit just loses so much shooting and, athletic pop and play finishing in a way that is really hard to make up. I mean, their second unit played well last night, to be clear, but like a Mac McClung, Jay Huff, Ray J. Dennis, Tony Bradley, Quentin Jackson second unit is not a lot, if any, really shot making, and Huff needs to get his shot going to be a shot maker for that group. From deep, they got 4 from Ray J. Dennis last night, but you can't expect that. And even with getting 4 from Ray J. Dennis, they were 6 of 17 as a second unit from deep. Like, they're going to miss Toppin a lot, and he was their center, their best center at times this season. And by at times, I mean basically every time they had any important moment going on. So it's a huge loss, and it is the one, for my own brain, it was the dam break of like, oh boy, like they are going to be relying on some really weird, goofy, crazy lineups now because, again, they have 2 of their top 8, and then everybody else was like either out of their rotation last year or barely in it in the case of Shepherd and Walker, and they've got to find a way to win with that crew until people return, and it's going to be still some time before they get some of their key players back. So being creative, I think the starting lineup they found last night was pretty good, but they're going to have to be creative to find lineups that actually work, and amazingly, Toppin is the guy that's injury made that the case.
Ben Shepherd, in terms of running the point, which is now part of his responsibility. I'm not saying that he did not in spurts or in some sets do that previously, but if that's going to become a for the time being a big responsibility for Ben Shepherd, Tony, how much do you think that is a learned skill set that he has? In other words, he's a guy that's played a lot of minutes. He's a guy that's been on the floor in key moments for Indiana, since he entered the league. But in terms of being at the top of the key and starting distribution as opposed to being in the corner and then just facilitating it once a set starts to slow down a little bit, how big an adjustment do you think that is for him?
It's very different. And so to his credit so far, I think this is by far the most we've seen him get into the paint at all with the Pacers in terms of just dribbling around a screen or dribbling around the defender to be in a place where he can at least kind of set something up. I'm not saying it's going super well, but better than I've ever seen him be with his attacks. That's a big change from him, right? Like you said, he's always kind of been run to the corner, finish a play, run to the corner, immediately pass it to somebody else and cut somewhere else. And that stuff is all very important to the function of the team. That's why Rick Carlisle has always been such a fan of his, but this is different. This is much, much different. He is asked to actually put the ball on the floor and create shots. And he's gotten a wiggle to get inside the arc, but it has subtracted from his ability to do the other thing that makes him good, which is shoot threes. I mean, he's been dreadful as a jump shooter this year. And everybody was, basically, except for Jarris Walker and Ray J. Dennis last night from 3. But, that's what they need him to do usually is, defend a guard and make life hard on a guard and get skinny around screens and make threes. And it's been hard for him to do either because he's using so much energy as the one. When I talked to him in Memphis, we kind of talked about how, in his eyes, and even Taylor Peter felt this way too because he was kind of playing backup point guard, they are technically the point guard. They are taking it across the court. Sometimes they're asked kind of get in the teeth and distribute, but they kind of view it as they're dribbling across half court, but the system is the point guard. They just have to get the play started, and then everybody flows and runs, and it's action to action, and then eventually the team gets a good shot. And I do agree with that. That does take away some responsibility from these non-nominal point guards, but the system still doesn't function as well without a guy who is vision to see openings or a guy who knows the timing of when someone's going to get open, or it's just a whiz in transition isn't there. And that's why I think recently they functioned so much better with Ray J. Dennis on the floor. Dennis isn't going to shoot this well forever, but he has some of those more nominal point guard and natural distributing skills that are lacking elsewhere. So I don't mean to take your Ben Shepherd question and get it somewhere else, but I think their point guard situation, having just two-way guys available, has really shown that, yes, there are alignments where they don't need one. They can have ball handlers who are not natural passers, and their system will work okay. They'll get good shots out of it, but they still function just a little bit better offensively if they have someone out there who can kind of set stuff up and get things going.
Tony East is our guest. Java House Peel and Pour guest line is where he is appearing. Tony, your thoughts last night on Mac McClung, and I don't know that we've talked to you since he was acquired by Indiana. Were you surprised by, I guess, the length of the deal in terms of his signing and just what you thought he gave last night, even though obviously limited?
Yeah, I thought the move made sense. Not just I'd say talent-wise, my opinion of James Wiseman and Mac McClung is about the same. Like, that's basically a wash to me in terms of add or loss of talent. But in terms of what the Pacers get, in terms of roster balance and what they need right now, it makes tons of sense, right? Last night they would have been playing with 10 players, and 4 of them would have been centers, right? You just can't do that. Like, they did that in Minnesota, and they had to start Jay Huff and Isaiah Jackson. It didn't work, right? That's why they didn't want to do that again. They get another guard in the door, and they can play all of Bradley, Huff, and Jackson a normal amount of time and then have a bench unit that actually works and makes at least some sense. And McClung played fine, right? He had the and 1-3. He got to the basket. Actually, his pesky defense was the thing that I was like, oh, okay. Like, I have a little actual impression of your defense from the G League or your 6 NBA games. You know, who knows if this will hold up. But, like, it was fine. The fact that he didn't look – like, my grade for players who have been on the team for a day is usually that. Like, do you look like you've been on the team for a day, or do you look like you know what you're doing? And he looked like he knew what he was doing. So we'll see if shots continue to go in or not. But it was a fine debut, and I understood the move. As for the length of the contract, this has become a Pacers special. This is the Pacers special to me. This is the 3rd or 4th guy across the last 2 seasons that they've gone fully non-guaranteed for 2 years with a team option on the 2nd year. Basically what they're doing is they're buying the team option. They're saying, if you play well, we get to keep you for another non-guaranteed year. And if you don't, yeah, we pay you a little more this year, but it doesn't actually hurt us. We can just cut you. So Moses Brown got that contract, and he didn't fit particularly well, and he got waived. Tony Bradley got that contract, and now he's on the team again, right? Yeah. Like, they got lucky to get Tony Bradley on that contract, and he's been maybe their best center this season. I think Benny would say that his spurts have been their best over the weekend and then their most recent game. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It costs you a little bit more up front, but they can afford to do that. If McClung is any good for them or fits their system, they'll be happy they have a multi-year deal because it's completely non-guaranteed. And if he doesn't, there's not actually that much harm because they can kind of cut him any time. So it does hurt them a little bit in terms of immediate flexibility of spending, but it depends on how long he's on the team in terms of how much it hurts them. And if he's on the team for long anyway, it's not that big of a deal. So it's kind of creative the way they're doing it, and I thought he was adequate in his first game.
Tony East joins us on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Use code JAKE25 for 25%.
Look at you, Eddie.
Off of your order online. Tony, to kind of piggyback off of the Mac McClung discussion, why would they give him a 2-year non-guaranteed deal versus converting one of Quentin Jackson or Ray J. Dennis from a two-way to a standard NBA contract and then signing Mac McClung to the two-way deal? Why'd they do it that way instead of the other?
Because it doesn't matter. I mean, okay. Like the thing about two ways is that the players are like, it's always hard to get your head. Even I struggle like thinking about this correctly. Like a two-way contract player is technically on your team already, right? And so you don't have to convert them. The reason you would convert them is to do what you said, to open up a two-way spot for someone else. McClung has, I believe, exactly 4 years of service in the NBA, so I think he would have been eligible for a two-way one more time. I'm not actually. It's so confusing when players have a full season or they don't play when it comes to years of service, but I believe that would have counted for him. Either way, yeah, that would have been possible for them to do, but they don't have to do that, right? Like now they have because if you convert that guy, he's not on a non-guaranteed 2-year deal with a team option. They'd be on a 1-year non-guaranteed minimum if you just straight up convert them. So you can always re-sign them to something different, but you know, there's no functional difference outside of not rewarding a guy who's been on your team. And if McClung stinks, maybe they can go, okay, great, let's try what you just said. Let's convert Q or convert Ray J and then do somebody else on this two-way. But you know, there's no actually like functional difference in terms of who can play in games for them. If anything, the difference is once the season starts, the amount of games you're available to play on a two-way deal starts to prorate, and it doesn't change for the guys who start the season on the team. So they maximize their number of two-way games this way, and we'll see if that actually ends up mattering or not.
Fascinating to me, and I would assume, Tony, in conclusion, that each franchise has someone who does nothing but looks at the nuances of contracts in terms of lengths, flexibility, two-way versus, you start getting into all of the finite of legality and salary cap and maneuverability of finance and all of that. You would think that Kevin Pritchard and Chad Buchanan are saying, okay, here's a guy we're interested in, and then who would it be? Would it be Ted that they go to and they say, how does this work out, or where do we massage it? Is there an office that looks at specifically that when personnel is then mentioned?
Yeah, Ted's the expert on that. It used to be Peter Dinwiddie, if you remember him.
Yep.
And it's the questions are kind of just like, can we do this? Should we, how does that work? And then someone says, no, we can't. Or like, oh, that doesn't actually give us an advantage. At least that'd be my interpretation. And every single team or most teams now do something like this. And like, if someone listening to this is a football guy, I mean, how many times has the New Orleans Saints created an advantage spending wise out of nothing by, knowing the cap rules differently than other teams, or interpreting them or using them differently than other teams? And I would say there are a lot of NBA teams that you can tell who is, or how much pull or what kind of cap guy they have, given what their moves are and what they specialize in. Like the Knicks have a very creative and well-known cap guy. The Lakers love to give out player options for some reason. That's their thing. The Rockets are very good at negotiating. That's their thing. They're good at getting everything down. And every team has like a style of contract. For a while, people would always call me and be like, oh, it's a Pacers deal. It must be flat, right? Because they did a flat contract for Aaron Nesmith and Doug McDermott and a couple other guys. Now it's the Hawks who are doing that, right? Like there are always little things here and there that kind of differentiate how teams spend their money. And the Pacers, this new little non-guaranteed 2-year team option thing has been something they've been attracted to the last couple of years. And, sometimes it doesn't work, like with Moses Brown, and sometimes it's great, like with Tony Bradley. So you just never know, and maybe McClung will be something for them.
Ted Wu, by the way, the Executive Vice President of Basketball Operations and Assistant General Manager for the Pacers, and kind of their numerologist, capologist, if you will.
Very
Tony,
sharp. Very sharp.
Yeah, and so is Peter Dinwiddie, right? Same type role. Those guys are far beyond my intellectual capability, no question. Tony, appreciate it as always. The aforementioned Atlanta Hawks, by the way, are the ones that are at the Field House tomorrow night. Appreciate it, Tony.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Tony East on the Java House Peel and Port guest line. We come back, quick look at the I keep getting those two mixed up, the Colts, back to that side of it in terms of their injury report, because practice yesterday, there were some that were not out there. We will get you up to speed on it next. The Fenderbird, by the way, is the guitar. This song close to the Colts. And John Entwistle, I should say, of The Who, playing the Fenderbird, played this for a 5-year stretch. One would assume that it is on this song as well. That is also part of the Jim Irsay collection. I don't know that I realized. Did you ever go, Eddie, to see the Jim Irsay collection?
I did not.
I don't know that I ever realized it's impressive. When you really look at the list, you can go and see it as one thing, but then to look at a list of all of the different things that are on it is when you're really like, wow. I mean, then it really jumps out at you. Also jumping out at me were those that didn't practice yesterday for the Colts. I don't know that I anticipated it to be this vast. Nick Cross did not practice yesterday with a shoulder injury. Josh Downs did not practice with a hip injury. I'm listing for you, or I'm reading for you what is listed as the reasoning. We knew that Samson Ebukam with a knee injury.
Let's go.
Thank you.
Let's go, Jake.
I have to pause when I say it.
You can't get Colts and Pacers right, but you can sure as hell get Samson Ebukam right.
That's right.
Makes total sense.
That's exactly correct. But we knew that with the knee injury that he was one of them. Matt Gonzalez, condolences to him. His father passed, and so he did not practice yesterday. Anthony Gould, we anticipated, would be out. He is. He did not practice. I shouldn't say he's out for the game, but he did not practice yesterday with a knee injury. Jalen Jones is the big one because with the hamstring, he went full practice yesterday, and it is trending like they're going to get that back in their defensive backfield, which is big. Tyquan Lewis,
friend of
groin
the show.
injury, didn't practice. What's that?
Friend of the show.
Kenny Moore didn't practice with that Achilles, but that is the same as what happened a week ago, and then obviously he did play. Braden Smith always gets that rest day. I'd like to do – Braden Smith's got the – that guy's got the deal, man. I'm just going to take Wednesdays off.
Well, remember, he's got that – I think it's a degenerative knee issue, and they're kind of like –
yeah, I get it. And veteran players kind of earn that right. Grover Stewart also with a foot. We all have a foot. Most of us do, fortunately. And he did not practice yesterday.
I've got 2 of them.
2 feet?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know about you.
TMI. So those are those that we will keep an eye on. We will talk actually from the Pittsburgh standpoint of things about what the Steelers might have in store as the Colts go to a place that they have not won since 2008. Basketball last night beyond just the Pacers. That discussion next. The Fender Mustang of Kurt Cobain was used not only in Nevermind, but also in Utero, and of course, Smells Like Teen Spirit, the signature song of Nirvana. And that guitar that you're hearing, I don't know if it's the exact one of the time of recording, but the one that he used throughout the time that they were doing Nevermind, Kurt Cobain, that is one of those in the Jim Irsay collection. Good afternoon to you on a Thursday. Jake Query along with Eddie Garrison at his Query and Company here on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan, college basketball to discuss last night, Pacers as well. We'll get into that in just a moment.
Happy Thursday. Hope you're doing well, Jake.
But, I'm starting to feel better. I mentioned to you earlier that a couple times a month, in the morning, the medication I take, I'm like, ugh. And so therefore, I'm like, I got to lean on you a little bit, right?
Yeah, that's what happens, Jake. When you lean on me, you just start feeling a whole lot better.
That's it. I wonder if there's a guitar in that song. Lean on me when you're not. Is that one of them that you think's in the Irsay collection? I
don't know.
The stuff that is in there, and for those that are just joining us, if you're wondering why we keep talking about the Irsay collection, the news came out today. I don't think it's overly surprising, but I want to get back into it as well, about the fact that the Jim Irsay collection, which he took great pride in, his 3 daughters have decided that they are going to put that up for sale at auction. And I think there's probably more to that we'll get into. And it takes me back to, Eddie, when you were a kid growing up,
mm-hmm.
and obviously your parents are still around and healthy and vibrant, was there something that your parents had or collected or whatever else that deep down you're like, yeah, it's not of that much interest to me?
I'm not sure. Oh, well, I guess I found out when my parents moved from their old house that my dad has like a blank ton of empty beer cans.
Really? That you told me about that. Yeah. Billy Beer? Does he have a Billy Beer can?
I think so. It wouldn't shock me.
Are they pull tab beer cans?
Yeah, he's got all of them.
That was a big thing back in the day, was collecting beer cans. My sister was big into that in the 70s.
You know those big plastic storage totes?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And he's got like 3 of them full of them. Maybe wonder what my dad was doing in his college days.
There was a time where we used to be a real country where beer cans were art.
So were ticket stubs.
And ticket stubs. I have all of my ticket stubs. All of them, until the digital ticketing era. I have the final 5. I have 5 untorn, unused tickets of the last 5 Pacer games at Market Square Arena. I have ticket stubs from every concert I attended, all of it, the best. And when I was a kid, I collected baseball cards. And when I collected baseball cards, like every kid, I was convinced this was my retirement plan. This, when I'm an old man, my baseball cards are going to be, I don't even know how much they're going to be worth. I went to the shows. I did the trades. I traded once I wanted every card of Joe Morgan.
That's funny you mentioned that, because that was to tie it to Jim Irsay. That's how he got into, collecting stuff. You started collecting baseball cards as a kid.
Is that how it started?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then with baseball cards, obviously the reason baseball cards were valuable in the 60s or 70s is because the big player cards, the Mickey Mantles, the Mickey Mantle rookie, etc.
Ty Cobb, yeah.
Those became valuable because kids, when they got them in the 50s and 60s, would put them in the spokes of their bike to make the motorcycle type sound. Kind of like what the toilet in this building does next to us, when all of a sudden I'll ask you in the middle, we'll be doing the show, and I'm like, what is going on? And it sounds like we're being launched and people might hear that on the radio. It's actually just there's a washer that needs to be replaced in the toilet next door to us here. Okay? But it would make a sound similar to that. And so the cards that were being produced in that era were no longer, it was rare to find one in mint condition. Thus, the value escalated. And then everybody started holding on to them, so they became commonplace, and the value went down. The point, long-winded, being, I remember once saying to my dad, it was a Ricky Henderson rookie. Dad, this card's worth $200. My dad said, really? I said, yeah, it's worth $200. Ricky Henderson rookie card. And my dad said, so have you found anybody to buy it yet? And I said, what do you mean? Have you found anybody to buy it? And I said, no, but the Beckett's says it's worth $200. And my dad said, it's only worth what someone's willing to pay for it. And one of the things about the Irsay collection that I will be intrigued to find, and I'm sure this is the case, but many of the guitars that he purchased for multi-millions worth of dollars, and the collection itself is estimated to be worth somewhere between $1 billion and $1.5 billion. But that's assuming that there is someone out there, individually speaking, willing to pay for each guitar at auction. Is Jim Irsay one of the few people that was willing to pony up and pay that, or are there others out there? I don't know that, but one of the things that will be of note to watch. Now, last night in college basketball, Purdue, we will begin there at Mackey Arena, coming off of their exhibition against Kentucky. And it is difficult oftentimes to tell in exhibitions about a team for a couple of reasons. The first being you have no idea how invested the coach is in terms of lineups, strategy, etc. Brian Newbert, when he came on with us for Gold and Black, was saying when Purdue designed it to play an exhibition against Kentucky, that the opponent is almost irrelevant to Matt Painter and his group. Yes, they want to be tested athletically. Yes, they want guys that, but in terms of breaking down film and figuring out what Kentucky's going to run and etc., that's not the point of the exercise. And in addition to that, I don't know that Purdue is going out in these exhibitions and saying, we're going to run this set, that set, we're going to put this person at this position, and that's exactly what they're going to play over the course of the Big Ten year. You are really intermixing things and putting people in, and oftentimes you are trying different combinations to see what will work. Hey, how well does Oscar Clough play on the floor when Jack Bencher's out there? Or, how much does it impact the way Daniel Jacobson plays if the entry pass is coming from someone other than, the obvious in Braden Smith? Things like that. I think you look at some of that, but you can get an idea. Players that feel comfortable regardless of situation, can shoot the ball well, score the ball well. They got good minutes last night, for example, I thought Purdue did, from Daniel Jacobson, which we were kind of waiting to see what Daniel Jacobson against Kentucky. You didn't see it as much. And obviously a year ago, he got hurt very early on. And it's an unfair comparison to say, but this is what we do in sports. You look at a player and you immediately compare it to the precedent before of who he's replacing and how he compares to that. And Jacobson, because of the fact that he is a 7-footer plus and he's coming right off of Zach Edey, you automatically assume, here goes Purdue again. Big, immovable object in the middle, and that's what they're going to focus everything around, and that's going to be literally the key piece that everything's centering off of. Well, that's totally unfair. And Jacobson, in the extremely limited amount of time that you saw him a year ago, it was of intrigue. But one thing we know is he does not have the overall body strength that few do at that size of Zach Edey. But you have to go back and think about.
You think he gets called the Big Maple?
Which one?
Zach Edey.
He kind of should, right?
James Paxton, I know, used to be called the Big Maple in Major League Baseball.
Jacobson is from what, Minnesota? Is that right?
I think so.
I believe that's his home state. Because also kind of applicable there. But yes, Maple, you think more. For example, my Blue Jays hat that I'm wearing right now with the maple leaf on it. I mean, I'm all in. 9 weeks in, right? Here we go. 9 innings away. 9 weeks in, 9 innings to go.
No, he's from Chicago.
Is he really? I was thinking he was from Minnesota for some reason.
He helped Switzerland in the Gold Cup the FIBA U19 World Cup over the summer. Win gold.
They did win?
Yeah.
Usually they're stuck in neutral.
Yeah, I know, right?
But either way, when Edey was a younger player, and it's very easy to forget this because of the fact that you focus on the National Player of the Year and the dominance of Zach Edey. He was an unstoppable player in college by the end. But you forget it in the beginning when he would get the ball in the low post, when even if he flashed up and occasionally would get it in the high post, but you could see the gears turning. You could see that he was having to think through. Very few things were instinctive for Zach Edey early. And for Daniel Jacobson, it is unfair that we automatically assume that what you're getting is end-of-career Zach Edey as opposed to early Zach Edey.
Is he a better version of Matt Harms?
Yes.
I think that's more.
But I think he's a more
comparable.
offensive player than Matt Harms. Matt Harms was a very good shot blocker and defender.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He reminds me of more of like the Matt Harms and the skill set type, defensively, and he has the ability, does Jacobson, to kind of stretch out the floor to give Purdue that, that 5-out look they want to have, like with all 5 guys on the floor being able to shoot.
They got really good play from Jakari Harris last night, and that's what you need. You know what you're getting out of Trey Kaufman-Renn. You know what you're getting. For the most part, you know what you're getting out of C.J. Cox. You know what you're getting out of Braden Smith. You know what you're getting out of Fletcher Loyer. You know that going in. It's a matter of how much the complementary pieces, who is going to be that Mason Gillis type, right, that comes in and can get you points right off the bench.
Lance Jones,
another one, yes. That's and they have the personnel for it. But when you look at last night in that particular game, and yes, they were not overly tested by UIndy. Nothing against your alma mater.
Don't disparage the Greyhounds like that. They didn't get doubled up, Jake.
Like I said,
that should be a real red flag for Purdue.
Purdue shooting 50%, were they?
I don't know.
From 3-point range? They were shooting the ball from the outside. It was clicking for them a little bit.
Should bet on the Hounds to win the D2 championship. They didn't get doubled up by Purdue.
Are they hanging a banner for that? Is that what you're telling me?
I don't know. No, because we're Jake, UIndy does not hang banners in participation trophies.
Fair enough. Now, speaking of shooting 50% from 3-point range, so too did Butler. And Butler with Indiana State, 25-point win. Indiana State, obviously, you heard J&V talking about it yesterday. You've got a situation where, and the Graves and Butler, and there's a lot of intertwining there, right? But and you certainly, again, the best to Matthew Graves, but as his team now goes into Hinkle last night, Butler and Thad Matta they are doing kind of the same thing, right? They are having to find their way through with new faces, new lineups, etc. And they were pretty balanced last night. They shot the ball very well from outside to Butler. I didn't see a lot of the game, admittedly, but they shot the ball very well, but they balanced their scoring throughout. And that is probably a little bit more of a realistic test. But the one thing for Butler last night is that style that they're playing. And I think they're going to have to shoot the ball better from the outside in the Big East. But you've got to be physical in the Big East, and you've got to be able to play and run at size. And as a result of that, you've got to go beyond just 5. You've got to be pretty deep because you are playing at a different pace within the Big East. And I think you saw Thad Matta's made a concerted effort with this roster to do that. I thought you saw it a little bit on display last night.
Can we just start saying
11 new
team
faces
needs to
for
be
Butler?
Physical, Jake, they need to be Olivia Newton-John?
Yes. Again, today we got usurped on our plan, right? I mean, our idea today, we had a big meeting about this yesterday, and they did some research on this, and they said people loved that yesterday you played all the songs from 2008, the last time the Colts won in Pittsburgh when Eddie was 10, and people are really looking forward to hearing songs from 1982 when Jake was 10, led by Olivia Newton-John's Physical, and yet that has now been usurped by the fact that we're playing nothing today but stuff from the Jim Irsay collection, right?
Yeah.
Do you have other requests from the Jim Irsay collection songs?
I have to look into it to see what all he's got in there, because I know he's got more than just guitars.
Here's what you have to look forward to, and I'm not saying this happened with the Irsay girls.
Got the Muhammad Ali belt. You've got, a ticket stub.
I remember somebody who, I'm not going to say any names, somebody who worked for the Colts telling me, they're like, yeah, it was during the Combine a couple of years ago. Somebody saying, I was up really late last night because I had kind of like when Elaine on Seinfeld got to go and buy for Jay Peterman. She had to go buy the JFK golf clubs, and she had the paddle and had to go to the auction. It was the Ali belt that somebody that works for the Colts was told, like, go online to this auction. It's happening overseas, so it's in the middle of the night, but you need to go online, and here's the amount that you can spend and buy this. And they were like, so I had to sit there and wait all night and continue to do this, and I'm dragging today at the combine and that was what was purchased, was the Ali belt. But
imagine just being the person. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna put $3 billion, whatever, not $3 billion, but like
I think it went for $3.5 million. Is what it was, right?
$2 million here, $2 million there, $2 million there, $275.
Can you imagine being the auctioneer for it? I mean, how many people are in the room? I mean, obviously it's online, but how many people are in the room? Like, okay, now we got the Stratosphere, the Fender guitar, played by the Who. Who do we have? 252. How many? Doesn't it start to drop off pretty quick? There are two people in the room that actually are that have the money to do that.
Imagine if there was like some virtual like auctioneer type in internet issues and it's just lagging. Next thing you know, it can.
Well, wouldn't it? All of us have had this happen when it comes to going online to buy tickets or being in queue for something, and then all of a sudden, yes, your connection freezes or the site itself crashes, and then when it comes back on, you're like, oh my gosh, I missed out. Can you imagine? Like, a boss man wanted me to go and buy Prince's guitar, and I missed out instead. But then, who are you competing against? But this is what you have to look forward to, Eddie, as you progress, okay? And so many people are going to relate to what I'm saying. One of the things, and I am very fortunate, and I know that I'm blessed, and it is of the utmost fortune that both of my parents are still with us. I'm extreme and very fortunate for that, because they're in. I don't want them to feel like I'm saying they're aging, but they're in their 80s, right? And they're of good sound mind, etc. But once that happens, then what you have to look forward to is every time you go to their house, they're trying to pawn stuff off on you. You go over there and it's like, oh, I'm glad you stopped by. I was just cleaning out this drawer and I meant to show you. And if you want these, I have the spoons that you collected when you went to Niagara Falls in 1982. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah. Did you want those? And I mean, I'm a sentimental guy, okay? So a lot of times I'm like, yeah, sure. And then I'm like, wait a minute. No, but now I'm at the age where I'm trying to downsize, and yet you're wanting me to take this stuff on, okay? And then it becomes this balancing act.
When do we get the purge of 2025? The great purge of 2025?
Coming up. I had the great purge of 2020 where I got rid of about 60% of my possessions. Now,
which is just cologne and watches.
Correct. What I'm down to now is this, though. I have more than my fair share of T-shirts. I have an unhealthy number of T-shirts that I've got to purge. I got to get rid of that. For some reason, luggage-wise, I have like 6 suitcases now. I don't know what's going on there, but
how many of them are in your fancy luggage bags? Okay?
I'm telling you, 2 of the luggage bags that I have been turned into cat hammocks, but nonetheless, I have them. But with the Jim Irsay collection, I'm going to get back into this. I mentioned earlier, Jim Irsay was a very eccentric individual, but he also was a passionate individual. And he had passions beyond football, and I always admired that. He had a passion for the eccentric, but it wasn't a selfish passion. He wanted to make sure that he shared that of things that he found of importance with the rest of the world. And as I mentioned earlier, it's almost like we're all walking along the same hiking trail, and Jim Irsay would wander off trail because there was a bush there with flowers that were so beautiful that he wanted to make sure that everybody else was able to see them. But only he had the means to get off trail, so he brought the bush back to the trail where everybody else could admire it. And that's what he did with this collection. And it's not just guitars. I think that I myself at one point thought it was just guitars. It is far more than that. It is historical archives. It is pop culturally relevant pieces of literature and poetry and all, American history, literally. I mean, letters from Abraham Lincoln, things that were signed from John Hancock, significant things that he found it important to be able to share with other people. And he was apparently, by his own admission, offered over $1 billion for it at one point and said that he declined that because he found it to be the collection not only priceless, but also he did not see it as an investment. That is not the reason that he was accumulating things. I think he was accumulating and collecting the things for that fact. He wanted people to be able to share with what it was that he was able to afford. And I mean that both emotionally and financially. However, it was, to an extent, the irony of that subject. It was, in fact, an investment for him, because now, and I don't know that this is the overwhelming cause or motivation, but I would assume the reality is that upon his passing, and yes, I get that people far more educated about this, far more dialed in, far more financially sound than myself would have already begun the process of what I'm about to say. But the reality is that in the United States, when you have a billion, and I'm using a B there, dollar empire, and you pass, there is an inheritance tax that is responsible to Uncle Sam, where you have to come up with the money to pay 40% the valuation of what that team is worth, according to what the federal government estimates. And that means that even though there might have been all kinds of things done to prepare for it, and yes, they may have, I don't know how many people would, the money to pay an inheritance tax based on the passing of Jim Irsay, but this one would assume, even though, and I again applaud the girls for saying a portion of this revenue that will be generated by the sale of the collection at auction will go towards charity, but I would also assume that a portion of that goes towards the responsibility, financially speaking, of taxes owed based on what it was that was inherited, which is an NFL franchise that has anywhere, depending on who you ask, a valuation of, the high $2 billion on the low side to $4 billion, which would mean a tax of over $1 billion that is responsible. And I'm sure there are ways that that's been shaved down, moved around, et cetera. I mean, people far smarter than I would do that. But I would assume that this also, even though it was not designed to be an investment, it was somewhat of yet a gift to the daughters in the fact that could alleviate some of that responsibility. Do you happen to are you going with Biscoff cookies or peanuts, Eddie?
I'm going with Biscoff cookies as always, Jake.
Because you can drive to Pittsburgh, but we're going to fly there. It is, in fact, a Thursday road trip we're going to take and find out from the Steelers' side of things what the Colts might see on Sunday. 64 Gibson SC that is used by George Harrison in Paperback Writer. One of the guitars that is now, and if you would like to own that guitar, all you have to do, I believe is it Christie's that is doing the auctioning? All you have to do is get in line for the auction for the Jim Irsay collection, as it is now up for sale. And all of the guitars, the historical archives, all of it. We've been playing songs throughout the course of the day that relate to exactly that. We're going to go to Pittsburgh here in just a second. Tim Benz will join us from the Tribune Review and Fox Sports Radio in Pittsburgh to find out what the Steelers have lined up. And in addition to that, where they stand health-wise. Again, I thought the Colts injury report in terms of who didn't practice yesterday, Matt Gonzalez with and certainly condolences, the passing of his father, is out in terms of practice for personal reasons. I would assume that he is a go on Sunday, but we'll find out. But there were a couple of others. Kenny Moore sitting out again with the Achilles, but he did that last week and then ended up playing. Joining us now on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line in Pittsburgh, Tim Benz, that we discussed. Eddie, you said we don't have Tim. Sorry about that. I thought we did. We'll go out there in just a minute. But this is a place that the Colts have not won since 2008. I've only mentioned that 100 times. It's very easy to look at something like that and say, boy, this is going to be a tough place because, well, what happened in like 2014 is not really relevant to the current roster, right? And I think the Steelers are good. Aaron Rodgers, obviously, anytime you have him on the field, you have to be aware of offensively what Pittsburgh can do. But then defensively, one would assume that Indianapolis is going to be able to put points on the board. They've done so all year. Tim joins us now on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. And Tim Benz, I will begin with that. Defensively speaking, what is going on with Pittsburgh? Because it feels as though they are very susceptible, and this is a high-flying offense that Indianapolis will bring.
Yeah, this is a terrible matchup for the Steelers right now. Wrong team, wrong time. So, of course, the Steelers will probably turn around and win. That's just how the NFL goes. But
that's right.
If you look at how they've played, there's no reason to think that. And I say they, meaning both teams. The Colts have been very good. The Steelers have been very bad lately. And honestly, when they've won games this year, it hasn't been because their defense has been rock solid steady. It's because of sacks and turnover luck. They got 5 against the Patriots. They got a huge one against the Jets late on special teams. Now, to be fair, they forced those turnovers. They hit guys hard when they're in the vicinity to catch them and tackle them, but that hasn't often been the case. So I don't like this matchup for Pittsburgh at all. You asked what the problem has been. It's been many. First of all, when they try to play man, they still act like they're in zone. They don't get up and press because they're scared to death of getting beaten deep and getting run by. The pass rush has been neutralized by chipping and doubling on Watt and quarterbacks getting rid of the ball quickly. They used to have a real knack for batting the ball at the line of scrimmage to sort of counter that. That's disappeared. And they're occasionally susceptible against the run. With a back like Taylor, I don't think it would be occasional. It's occasional when you face Chase Brown, but when you face a force like Taylor, it's something entirely different. So I don't like anything about this matchup on that side of the ball for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean,
aside from that, it's great.
What's that?
Aside from that, it's great.
I mean, and Tim, the reality is this. Whoever would have guessed, I think, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the anticipation was of the Steelers' defense going into the season versus where they are now. But certainly when it comes to the Colts, offensively speaking, we knew Jonathan Taylor is a great player and that they had a couple of guys. I think we knew that Tyler Warren was going to be a good player. But are you as stunned outside of Indianapolis by what the Colts are doing offensively as we are here, being those that cover the team each week?
Oh, thanks for reminding me. I forgot to say the Steelers are crappy at covering tight ends, too. So thanks for reminding me about Warren. Yeah, I'm surprised. Like, I didn't know who to pick in the South. I didn't pick them. I picked Houston. I'm fearful always of seeing the Colts on the schedule based on the last 2 years and what Steichen has done to Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin, even going back to when he was the OC in Philly. So, it's not like I have no respect for the Colts, particularly what they can do offensively. They haven't had much success here in Pittsburgh in recent years. I have thought a little bit about that 2020 game when the Steelers were in a similar state of affairs where they started 11-0 and then everybody sort of figured out what they were doing with an aging Ben Roethlisberger in the COVID year, and they had a massive overcorrection. The one game they won late was against Indy, where I thought Indy was going to come in here and blow their doors off. So, I'm surprised at what the Colts are doing, that they've been able to sustain the success as much as they have in a topsy-turvy league like this. But I will say this, if you're serious about being a team that is a little bit of a newcomer to the party and you think you're going to beat Buffalo or Kansas City in the playoffs, then beat Pittsburgh right now when they're down and on the mat. Don't let them off the mat, because that's one that you have to scratch your head about. If so much is in your favor and you somehow let the Steelers win this game, that would be surprising to me. I'm really struggling to find the calculus where the Steelers beat the Colts unless the Colts just have a bad game plan, bad day, or are sloppy with the football and turn it over a bunch, or have some sort of significant injury or two mid-game that they can't recover from.
So let's say that is the case, Tim. Tim Benz is our guest in Pittsburgh. Let's say that's the case where the Colts turn the ball over or they just have an offensively stagnant day. It happens. Then from Pittsburgh's standpoint, we know about DK Metcalf, right? And Aaron Rodgers, obviously, maybe he's not Green Bay Aaron Rodgers, but still pretty good. Calvin Austin, it seems like they'll go tight end a little bit. What has been your assessment of Aaron Rodgers? And aside from DK Metcalf that we know about, Pittsburgh's offensive bell cow would be where?
Running with Warren, but they've gotten away from that too often in games where it's worked. There have been times where they've had to get away from the run because it just hasn't been there, but they've also gotten away from it in moments where I don't think they should, and I wonder if there's a little bit of a buyer's remorse component where they just don't trust Jaylen Warren to be the number one, even though they've made personnel moves and paid him like he is. I don't know why that is, because he hasn't done anything this year to me to suggest that he is anything less of a back than what he was when they made those decisions during the offseason. So I'm a little surprised by that. But you're right in what you said about DK, and then you start scratching your head about the other options receiving-wise. Roman Wilson finally had a day against Green Bay where he thought, oh, okay, this is why they made him a third-round pick. I don't have to squint to see it as much. So maybe that momentum continues. Austin, I think, in a good offense with a good quarterback like Rodgers, could be a good number 3. He's overcast as a number 2. The theory is that their number 2 wide receiver is the collection of the 4 tight ends. But, that's kind of tricky math when you start moving the catches around and the ball distribution around to have that add up to a number 2 receiver, and then what are you getting from your tight end then? So it's and really I think that the first time we saw that manifest was 2 games ago where Pat Freiermuth went off. On the tight ends, there were 4 combined touchdowns between the tight ends. Aside from that, it's been 1 tight end per game that's done something. And Rodgers, like you said, he's been good. He's been good. I don't have complaints about Rodgers. I have complaints about how they stalled out at the top of the red zone in 3 very important drives early in the game against Green Bay. And when Tomlin has complained about that this week, a lot of people have been throwing stones saying, well, you're just covering up for your bad defense. That's true. That's what he's doing, but he's also not wrong. So they've had some issues there in sort of like the high red zone area. And it's like, oh, just let Boswell kick another 50-yarder because he doesn't miss from there. That's going to be a dangerous equation as the weather gets worse and a sloppy Heinz Field.
In looking back at the Colts over the last handful of years and the quarterback situation, prior to Anthony Richardson and then into Daniel Jones, one of the guys that was a pretty good player here was Phillip Rivers, obviously at the end of his career. But it was weird, Tim, because it was during the COVID years, so we never really got to know Phillip Rivers, right? I mean, we knew the public persona of Phillip Rivers, but it wasn't like we were around and got to know Phillip Rivers. I'm curious because obviously it is still new to the game. Do you feel like you guys have gotten to know Aaron Rodgers at all?
Well, I haven't really tried. I mean, I feel like Aaron is constantly ready for a fight with the media. The coverage of his wait to come to Pittsburgh and the way it was perceived here was a lot of rolling of eyes and deep sighing, and a lot of that from people like myself, who are the opinion guys in Pittsburgh, that just weren't really on board with the decision. So it's taken some time for both sides to warm up to each other, but largely the coverage of him personally and as a quarterback has been favorable here since training camp started. Since football started, I haven't seen any wild disconnects between Aaron and the media. Try as he might, I feel like, to have a fight. I feel like he wants to swing a few punches.
Yeah, I think that's where I was going with that, and the fact that, and look, Tim, and I've got a lot of respect for what you said there, because I think there are those outside of what we do for a living that think that our job is to like try to warm up to and have dinner with athletes that we cover. And I don't think that's the case, but it is to still give glimpse sometimes as to what drives players, right? And I guess my question to redirect it about Rodgers would be, we know the public perception of him, that he's kind of this, odd, prickly, narcissistic, everybody seems to be at bay guy. And so I was curious if his behavior in Pittsburgh or his interaction has shown to be defiant of that stereotype.
Largely, yes. I'm waiting for the first 2 games in a row where the offense is at fault and not the defense. The perception of Rodgers has allowed him to not have to be cast that way, because there haven't been a lot of hard pointed questions at the play of Aaron Rodgers, because the defense has been what's under fire. And for the most part, the view of what the offense has done has been praising of Rodgers getting the most out of it, because he has one really good target to throw to, and that's just DK.
Is this a boulder in the stream game for Pittsburgh in terms of the trajectory of their season?
I'm going to say no, because I think people have it chalked up as a loss already, and have more or less since that Cincinnati Thursday night game. I think there could have been a crescendo, a real build-up to, even if the Steelers had lost the Packer game, if they had beaten the Bengals, it still would have felt like they were really in control of the North. And now it just feels like, can they hold on to the lead that they built while the rest of the North figures out what's going on with all these backup and injured quarterbacks?
Right.
I think it could have coalesced as this is a game for playoff positioning in the AFC playoffs, and maybe it would have felt different and bigger. Right now, it's just like, how do the Steelers cling to the North? And it's so much more crystallized on just the division games, because they got 4 wins, and if they manage to win all their other division games, well, there's your 9 and your 5-1 in the division. So, I think so many people now assume this is going to be a loss based on how the last 2 games went, that the bigger games are the next 2, which are like against the Chargers, that's 50-50, and then the return game against the Bengals, where they may or may not have Flacco. Who knows? So I just think it's like, hey, if they can upset the Colts, great. Tomlin has had these games in the past where everybody's kicking him while he's down, and the Steelers are getting raked over the coals by the local media, and they beat a team that's better at Acrisure Stadium, and the national media goes, there's Mike Tomlin. There's the Mike Tomlin we know. That's why everybody who says he should be fired is stupid. That's the Mike Tomlin we know. And then you kind of go through that news cycle again.
Now, I was going to ask you about Tim Benz, our guest. He is with the Tribune Review in Pittsburgh. Tomlin, Pittsburgh has, as you know, Tim, the Steelers organization and franchise, I think, has always taken pride in its stability and the fact that it is not a place that is firing coaches all over the place and getting a new coach every 3 years and et cetera. Is leaning on that consistency, is buying into and absorbing that brand of reputation of stability, is that part of why Mike Tomlin is – I'm not saying that he merits being replaced or fired, but would his record have led to an ouster in other places more so than Pittsburgh?
Absolutely, because in other places, when the fans get as onerous and impatient and angry as the fans have been here, the owners listen. To their credit or to their blame, the Rooneys, both Dan and now Art II, do not, and they don't care. And they care about their fans, but they don't care about the opinion that you hold about their head coaching hire. So they are the most patient franchise in the world, I think, to a fault. And I mean, like, let me frame some of the stats as it relates to Tomlin's track record, and you tell me if these would resonate the same way in any other market but Pittsburgh. It's been 14 years, and this will be the 15th, since they last were in a Super Bowl, all right? So in those 14 years, 12 of those years have ended without a playoff win. It is now this. If they don't win a playoff game this year, this will be 9 in a row without a playoff win. And I don't think that people outside of Pittsburgh look at that emblem and see that kind of postseason failure, because that emblem carries 6 trophies with it whenever you look at it, even though the most recent of which is starting to get pretty dusty too, and that's from 2008. Like, they are as close now to being from their last Super Bowl championship in 08. In 10 when they made the trip, not the win, but they're as close to that year in 10 as they were when they went from 80 to 2005, going through Indy, by the way, in that game. They're as close to that, and they've had fewer playoff wins in that stretch as they did in the dark years of the 80s, believe it or not. It might be equal. It might be exactly the same, but depending on which year you count as the 80 or not, or you started the 79 year when they won their last one. So, like, there has been a really long drought here by Steelers standards that nobody talks about, because they just look at the Steeler hypocycloid and say, well, that's the franchise that has 6 Super Bowls, so they know what they're doing.
One for the thumb in 81. I when I was a kid and I was a Steelers fan, I think I even had a T-shirt that said one for the thumb in 81. It didn't happen in 81. But, all right, Tim, lastly.
Oh, yeah, I had that shirt, too, and I was still wearing it when I was in college, because it just got all the way to 1995 before they got to another one.
That's right.
And then all the way to 2005 till they won one.
Neil O'Donnell made Larry Brown like $300 million by throwing a couple of picks in the Super Bowl. Correct. Okay.
It's the 30th anniversary of that, by the way, coming up. So
that means the 30th anniversary of Cordell Stewart stepping out of the back of the end zone and then coming back in to beat the Colts, right? I mean, no hard feelings.
We don't talk about that here. And when we celebrate the 20th anniversary of 2005 on Sunday, nobody's going to be talking about any of the penalties that the Seahawks got either. So don't worry about that.
Or Nick Harper.
You're not alone in that regard.
Okay, last one. If your last name is Benz, if this Colts offense, and whoever would have guessed this, but if this offense is a Mercedes-Benz, what car is the Steelers' defense?
Well, I had a 1987 Ford Tempo that I used to drive back and forth to college when I was at Syracuse, and it used to make its own fog inside the chassis. Like, there was a hose that was detached, and I used to get fog inside the chassis. And that's sort of what this defense reminds me of right now, because it coughs and wheezes a lot as games go along. I'll give you, here's a little gambling nugget for you, all right? You can bet on the Colts over 6.5 points in the fourth quarter. The Steelers are allowing the worst fourth quarter percentage number of points scored. I think it's like 12 points per fourth quarter, like double what the Colts are averaging. The only way the Colts don't score touchdowns in the fourth quarter is if they're up 38-10 by the fourth. Now, I don't rule that out, but that feels like a sweetheart bet to me right now, because this defense just runs out of steam as the game goes along, because they allow so many plays. And they are on the field for so long that they just get tired. And I would love a fourth quarter touchdown bet on the Colts in this game.
Okay, that happens right around the time the defense is getting fog in the chassis, right? That's what we know, right?
Yeah, and we're all getting fogged over, waiting for the game to end and hearing how Tomlin's going to spin this one in the post-game press conference.
Tim Benz joining us from Pittsburgh on the Java House Peel and Port guest line. Tim, appreciate it, man.
You got it. Thanks for having me.
All right, good conversation. Tim Benz in Pittsburgh. By the way, and I should have asked this, his cousin is an actress that was in Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Training Day, amongst many other things, in case you were wondering. Julia Benz, Julie Benz, as she has also gone by, big-time actress and cousin to Tim. But I went with strictly the Steelers conversation.
I'm proud of you, Jake. That's you maturing.
I'm trying, right?
You can count on 3 things when there's a Colts player on, or any athlete for that matter. Number 1, ask them about their season. Number 2, the team. Number 3, their high school.
Oh, yeah. That's one of the best, right? One of the matter of fact, let me see where Julie went to high school. from Pittsburgh. I mean, obviously, they're cousins, right? So I'm assuming that Tim grew up in Pittsburgh. Franklin Regional School, Franklin Regional High School. Notable alumni. Tim, I would assume, is probably one of them. Looks like she might be a bunch of reality TV stars. That's what I'd like to be known as a reality star, right? And if we could do a reality show of behind the scenes, kind of like on the YouTube channel.
Wait, that's his cousin?
See,
I didn't know that's who that was. I love Dexter, and she's in Dexter.
Correct, she's in Dexter. That's correct. Eddie got on the Google. Now you're wishing I'd asked, huh? Now you're wishing, huh? How about that for maturity? David Gilmour's Black Strat, a 1969 Fender, is used not only in this recording, but Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, among others. That is one of the guitars in the Jim Irsay collection, as we have been discussing those things that will now be up for auction. And yes, several people have pointed out to me, I'm not going to lie, to me it's tomato, but it is not an inheritance tax, but an estate tax that would now be responsible for the Irsay daughters to pay. And again, I have no idea the financials of how some of that would have been already established, set up, etc., but one would assume that that is going to be a decent price tag. Here's another interesting point somebody made to me, which is great, because we were talking about the things that you have accumulated, or the fact that, as I mentioned, each time you get to a certain age where you go to visit your parents and they're like, oh, by the way, while you're here, I didn't know if you wanted this, and, I get it. Here is a book that was sent to me. Nobody wants your, I'll say, stuff. The Art of Decluttering Before You Die. And this text is fabulous. It says, all of my kids are grown, and I moved. When they came over, they took all the stuff that I never dreamed was of any importance to them, and they declined all the stuff that I'd saved on purpose for them. I think that's probably, there are certain things in my parents' house that are really of importance to me that probably they would be stunned by. And then there's other stuff they probably are like, can't wait for Jake to have this. And I'm like,
the part of your closet wall.
Oh, I'm telling you.
With all the signatures. Here's one that I just thought of, Jake, from my family. What lives longer, you or the Elio Castroneves half-eaten peanut butter cup?
Boy, that's a good question. Do you still have the...
My mom does, yes.
In the freezer, right?
Yes. No, not the freezer, the hyperbaric chamber. Much colder. Keeps it in mint condition.
For those that are unfamiliar with that of which we speak, it was during Carb Day, Castroneves came up on the stage with us. We had a thing of DeBrand fine chocolates, and he dove into the peanut butter cup, and he was like, whoa, this is great. But he's like, it's really rich, and he ate half of it, and then he left, and your mom was there, and she's a big fan of Castroneves. She met him, and I believe she took the cup, right?
You gave it to her, yeah. You presented it to her.
Yeah, and so she took it home. And that will be actually an heirloom for Eddie, which is exciting. We're going to do what we did last week as well, by the way, an Interactive Thursday. It was last week or 2 weeks ago we did an Interactive Thursday.
It had to be 2 weeks ago when I wasn't here.
I think that's right. Matt Taylor going to join us bottom of the hour. We have Colts to get into. We have college basketball and the Pacers to discuss from last night. And we got guitars to give away. But I am kind of curious whether or not is there anything that your parents left for you that you were like, yeah, I don't know, or vice versa, or anything Colts-wise you would like to discuss? We don't often open the phone lines, but we'll do so at 239-1070. But we will get back into what did take place last night on the basketball court as well. This, honestly, might be my favorite song of all time. Maybe that's like totally unoriginal because, oh, yeah, a guy like, it's the number one song from Billboard magazine or Rolling Stone or whatever all time. But the 1964, I hope I'm saying this correctly, Stratocaster guitar, you want to talk about, it's a Fender guitar. In the Jim Irsay collection of cultural significance, that is really high on the list because if you've seen the movie in particular about Bob Dylan, but at the Newport Folk Festival of 1965, Bob Dylan, who had always been an acoustic performer, it absolutely was to the ire of many of the audience when he plugged in for the first time. And the guitar in which he plugged in, that 1964 Fender, is among those in the Jim Irsay collection. And this is so par for the course probably in a lot of things in life. Part of me retrospectively now regrets that I did not take advantage of seeing the collection on full display in the few times that it was in the area, now that we know that it's going up for sale and, will be, then everything will kind of go into a bunch of different areas. One of the things that I think is the biggest question mark with the news today that the Jim Irsay collection is going on sale and will be up for auction is how many people worldwide. I mean, I get that, hey, Irsay allegedly had like an offer from, some say Saudi Arabia, some say Dubai, but from the Middle East of like $1.5 billion for his collection at one point. And yes, it would be very easy to say, well, then there you go. There's your sale right there. Well, if you're doing each item individually, how many people not named Jim Irsay on planet Earth would be willing to pay the money for, a John Lennon piano or whatever it might be that can have that kind of money? I will be very curious to see what, in fact, it fetches from a monetary standpoint. Last night, the Pacers on the road, and again, I think that we are impressed by the fact against Dallas that they kind of hung around and were as resilient as they were, and then also at the same time frustrated by the lack of three-point shooting. And we'll get into that in a second, but first let me bring John onto the show. Interactive Thursday at 239-1070. John, how are you?
Yeah. I'm doing great.
How intrigued are you? Are you saving up for one of the guitars, John?
No, I could care less, honestly.
Okay, fair enough.
The Pacers have been trying out a lot of guard help. We need guard help.
Yep.
And I know this isn't going to be popular, or maybe it will be. I don't know. But I don't think it probably would be. But I think we should bring Lance Stevenson back.
I knew you were going to go there. Listen, he's at the games, right? I mean, he's there a lot.
Right.
I just feel like, John, and look, he's an excitable player, right? And he's an exciting player, and he has great court vision. And, there's a lot to love about him. At the same time, it's also, and I'm not saying he's long in the tooth per se, but it's been a while since he's played in the NBA itself. And I think that, he's played overseas, so I'm not saying he's out of shape. He's a totally likable personality. He's a beloved fan figure, but I do believe, or fan favorite. I don't know this concretely, but I just get the impression that because they did bring him back once, right? I just feel like the brass of the Pacers look at what he brings to the table and at times as well the auxiliary that he brings with. And I don't mean any of it to say he's a bad guy, but I just think that there's kind of always drama a little bit around him. Or I think the thing with Lance Stevenson where it wouldn't be beneficial, and hear me out on this, John, but I remember that year that they had where they got off to the phenomenal start and then things kind of collapsed and there were all kinds of rumors. Oh, Paul George and Roy Hibbert and wives and girlfriends, all kinds of rumors flying around. And one of the things that was explained to me was, look, a huge part of why that whole thing went south was because Lance Stevenson was one that each play that the Pacers would do, each half-court set that they would do, they'd call out a play. George Hill or Paul George or whoever would come down the floor and, A12. And they knew that A12 meant the entry pass goes to Roy Hibbert. Well, if that's sealed off, then everyone knew that the alternate play to A12 was, in fact, B9, which goes to David West. So you come down and Hibbert's doubled, and so it goes to David West, and everyone knows, okay, David West just got the ball. That means now we're running a different set. And Stevenson was the guy that went rogue on that more often than not, and whether that was because he didn't want to run the alternate plays, didn't know the alternate plays, I don't know. But I think when you look at Rick Carlisle and the offensive sets they run now and the intricacies of them, there probably is reason why they've just decided to shy away from that. And that is in no way, shape, or form saying anything about it from an intellectual standpoint as much as just a free-flow basketball standpoint, which is the way that I think he prefers to play.
He's 35 now.
I was going to say his age also is, I was trying to figure out how old he would be now.
Yeah, he's 35 now.
Amazing how quickly the years add up. Colts trade deadline is coming up a week from yesterday. Richard, I believe, has thoughts. Hi, Richard.
That'd be 2 days ago.
Hey, how you doing?
That's right. Today's Thursday, yeah. Go ahead.
I think the big story everybody's missing out on is, of course, Ballard was on the hot seat, but now all of a sudden, since the Colts are winning, he's not on the hot seat. But I have a feeling he's not going to make any more trades before the deadline, trying to get his injured players back on a healthy roster. And if he doesn't make a trade and we end up, for instance, the Chargers, what they don't score 3 touchdowns in the second half against us, we couldn't stop them. So if we don't get somebody in there for help us, it's going to come back and bite him.
Interesting point, Richard. And, if you hear me talk, Richard, I always mention precedent, right? Like in sports, you can always go. One of the beautiful things about sports is there's always precedent, right? And Richard, you mentioned there the fact of the quick change from Ballard going from being, because it is funny, is it not, Richard? Like you are correct. 5 months ago, everyone's like, just let Ballard ride out the year and then let's make a change. And now all of a sudden, Richard, he's like he's the leading candidate for executive of the year, right?
Right.
Now.
He's a genius.
Correct. And you know who the last genius was to win executive of the year as a member of the Indianapolis Colts front office?
I have no idea.
Ryan Grigson. And Ryan Grigson, and actually Ron Epple of Chicago's Pizza pointed this out to me yesterday. Okay? Ron pointed this out to me, and it's a great point. Ryan Grigson won Executive of the Year because he had Andrew Luck as his quarterback. And Chris Ballard plods along trying to basically save his job year in and year out. And certainly the relationship he had with Jim Irsay, I'm sure, was beneficial towards job stability and security and whatever else. And he was very highly thought of when he was hired in Indianapolis, Chris Ballard, as an executive. And I think he was thought of as well as a guy that is building a roster and building a franchise based on his own internal pieces and his own year-by-year design, and was given the long rope to be able to do that. And yet we were all saying to ourselves, but for what? And then, lo and behold, what happens? And again, we will never probably know. We'll never know whether or not Chris Ballard truly, at his core, did Chris Ballard sign Daniel Jones because he looked at Daniel Jones and said, this guy was misused in New York and underused in Minnesota, and nobody else is seeing what I see in the circumstances and the situations that allow him to thrive as a quarterback. We have that in Indianapolis, and we have a coach in Shane Steichen in Indianapolis that can bring it out in him. And therefore, I'm going to sign him and I'm going to pretend like there's this competition between he and Anthony Richardson, but I know Daniel Jones, I see it in him. I can awaken that greatness. We'll never know whether that was the thought or whether the thought was, I've got a guy in Anthony Richardson that has all the tools, and I've got to motivate him somehow, and I've got to get a veteran in here to present like there's a challenge in order to get Richardson awakened. And, gosh, Daniel Jones is available. I'll do that. I tend to think it might be the former because of the amount they gave him, even though it was a one-year deal. But either way, Chris Ballard now is in the running for Executive of the Year and is essentially genius because, like Ryan Grigson in year one, he has a quarterback. And a quarterback makes that big of the difference. Now, in terms of a defensive player and a trade that is going to put them over the top, and yes, there are, clearly a phone call to Cincinnati is one that most people would expect would be made. And I do think that Ballard probably is trying to work the phone lines to get himself either a pass rush help or defensive back help. And the coveted draft capital that he talks so much about would be theoretically the piece that he would dangle for that. In this town, if you want to say, yeah, I was listening to the sports talk show, and this guy called in and said they got to make a trade for defensive help or else it's going to hurt him in the long run. You can scoff at that, and you can raise an eyebrow at Richard's point, but go back to precedent. Precedent says that Richard's point is not off base because what people often forget, the Super Bowl that was won in this town, the Lombardi that was won and brought to this town, yes, Bob Sanders was a great defender, the best in the game at the time when he was healthy. And yes, the Colts had a high-flying offense that allowed for them to then predict what teams were going to have to do against them in terms of the pass. And what Bill Polian did in building the Colts was he said, teams are going to have to throw the ball against us because I have an indoor team. And my indoor team, I'm going to play 8 of my games indoor on turf. So I want players that are fast. I want speed. Speed kills, and my team's going to outspeed people. And offensively, I have a generational quarterback in Peyton Manning. So I'm going to get Reggie Wayne, and I'm going to get Marvin Harrison, and I'm going to get Edgerrin James, although he inherited Marvin Harrison. And I'm going to, on defense, I'm going to go out and draft Dwight Freeney. People think he's undersized, but I like his speed, and in particular when he's playing half his games on turf. And I'm going to get this guy Robert Mathis because I like his direct line speed rush that he showed at Alabama A&M. And they had a defense designed to come crashing in from the corners and get after quarterbacks. But what they didn't do well was shut down the run. And Maurice Jones-Drew went for 275, and as Bob Kravitz wrote that year, the only thing that stopped him from running more was he had to stop when he got to the end zone. And the Colts then and Bill Polian in that situation said, we are going to end up at the end of the year talking about the fact that the one liability we had defensively was what sank us. And so they went out and they made a trade that didn't make huge headlines, but made some, and they got Booger McFarland. And they put him in the middle, and they shut down the run, and that was the final piece that put them over the top. And so, yes, Richard, you are correct. There is precedent there that says if the Colts feel right now that they are a team that can contend this year, and there's no reason to think they can't. They're 7-1. They have the best record in the NFL. They have a very good offense. They have a versatile offense, and they have a defense that has been good with Lou Anarumo. But they do have susceptibility, and pass rush is one. And when you look at Josh Allen, you look at Patrick Mahomes, what did Tim Benz just say when we talked to him in Pittsburgh? Look, it's great that they're playing well right now, but winning in November is totally different than having to win in December or January against those offenses. And likely it's going to be here. But there are a couple of challenges in the second half of the season that were not necessarily of that level in the first half of the season. Simon. What's up, Simon?
Hey, Jake. Thanks for taking my call. Listen, I want to start by saying one of the many things that I like about your show is what I'm getting ready to do. Like, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm going to challenge you a bit because at the end of the day, Ballard in the offseason has taken lots and lots of heat. I mean, John joked at the time that he was ready to fire the whole group, right? I don't know if you caught John's interview yesterday with Boomer Esiason. Did you catch that?
I did not, actually. My apologies. I did not.
Yeah. One of the things that that Boomer said, and apparently he has a close relationship with Frank Reich. And people in this media market have said, like people that I respect as journalists have said all along, like, this roster's good. We're just, we're missing a quarterback. And essentially that's what Boomer Esiason said that Frank Reich had told him was like, listen, Frank said to Boomer, look, I have a good player. Chris brings me good players. We just can't get this quarterback figured out. So while I'm not ready to crown Ballard as the GM of the year, I think consistently he's done a pretty good job of picking quality players. Again, it's easy to say that when you're 7-1, right? But at the end of the day, I think people that know have stood up for Ballard and recognized the job that he's done. I hope it all works out, but I just wanted to make that comment.
I don't disagree with that, Simon. I think it comes down to this, okay? And let me ask you this. Oh, Simon dropped off there. I was going to ask Simon how old he is. The lesson that I always go back to in this town, everything I just mentioned with Bill Polian, for example, and that final piece, right? And having a design, when you took Dwight Freeney, it was questionable. But then you see the reasons why in terms of that was just one piece of the jigsaw puzzle. Having Domas Sabonis and Miles Turner on the floor at the same time and deciding we've got to blow this up and get Tyrese Halliburton and hope that he is the center magnet of then looking at the way that he plays and making a trade for, trading away Malcolm Brogdon for Aaron Nesmith, who was little used in Boston. And it seemed weird at the time, but then you put that piece with this piece of Halliburton. And we talked about last night how Nesmith was not shooting the ball well last night. And part of that may well be because he's playing with guards that are unfamiliar with the angles and the positioning he needs the ball to be able, in a transition or on a set in terms of where he likes it, where he likes to get the ball when he shoots. And a Halliburton knows that, and a McConnell knows that, and a Nimhard knows that. A Mac McClung does not yet. A Ray J. Dennis does not yet. So all of the pieces have to fit together. And with Chris Ballard, Simon, I think that you make an excellent point, and it's a fair point, of the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. We couldn't totally get an idea of what the puzzle looks like in completion until we get that master piece in the Jenga blocks that puts it all together. And that would be the quarterback. In any, like I said, with Ryan Grigson. Ryan Grigson, he had that piece immediately, and everyone knew that Andrew Luck was that piece, right? Chris Ballard, if you want to say he gets credit because he put together a good roster and had good players, but we couldn't see the way those jigsaw puzzle pieces came together because of the quarterback position. I get that. The reality at the same time, though, is that the quarterback position was the responsibility of Chris Ballard. And yes, you could sit there and go over and over and say, well, the years in which he had to go and shop for one. Yeah, Andrew Luck retired unexpectedly on Chris Ballard. I get it. But the vast majority of teams right now that are winning in the NFL are winning with quarterbacks that were not on their roster at the time that Andrew Luck retired from the Colts. So they took care of that issue. And yes, there may not have been a number of quarterback like Justin Fields. There is rumor that Ballard was very high on Justin Fields. Obviously, that one would think now we have enough body of work to say that would have been somewhere where they would have erred. Not going after Matt Stafford, which was rumored at one point that Chris Ballard had said internally, like, look, I don't think Matthew Stafford, you can win with him. That would be an error. That would be an error in judgment. And then when finally push came to shove and it was like, this is the year you've got to draft a quarterback. And I get the fact they were taking, they were going to be the third quarterback in that class drafted. because you had Bryce Young there, you had C.J. Stroud there, you had Anthony Richardson, and then you had Will Levis. And Will Levis obviously was on. They chose Richardson over Levis, but they also said, Chris Ballard said, Richardson's the guy that I would have taken if I had the number one pick. Now, partially he's probably saying that, Simon, to build Richardson up. I get that, but the point being, he tried it with Jacoby Brissett. That was by circumstance. Totally understood. Phillip Rivers. Good signing. They thought they were going to get more than a year with him. Matt Ryan. Carson Wentz. Erred in terms of the way that he was going to get along within the ownership and the rest of the franchise. Matt Ryan erred on how much gas was left in the tank. And then Anthony Richardson, you could certainly argue, erred in terms of whether or not that was the guy to take. And I get why you did, and the intrigue and the fascination of the physicality of Anthony Richardson. But now, to your point, yes, it might have taken like the sixth crack at the bat, but he hit on Daniel Jones where no one else did. And he gets credit for that. And that is the piece then. Now we can see that, yes, in fact, the rest of the roster came together. I don't know that anybody ever said that, like, the roster was terrible under him. It was just the fact that the one area, the engine block that was needed to see how well the rest of the car would run, we kept waiting and waiting and waiting, and they tried several different engine parts. Some rebuilt, some weren't, some was brand new, et cetera. And now it's worked. Matt Taylor is the voice of the Colts, joins us next. Matt Taylor is the voice of the Colts. He will be on the call for the Colts and Pittsburgh Steelers coming up on Sunday. Matt, I mentioned this earlier, and I don't know if – let me ask this, and my apologies for having to ask this without having it right before me. Have you called a game in Pittsburgh before?
Yes, yeah. I've been there 3 or 4 times and then done play-by-play once. And
Okay.
It was a while ago. It was in 2019.
Gotcha. Okay. And again, my apologies on that. The reason I asked, back then, was it Heinz Field still?
It was, yep.
Because the one time that I went to a Colts-Steelers game as a media member years ago for a Monday Night Football game, in my hotel room, and I don't know if this was a hotel thing, a Steelers thing, an NFL thing, I have no idea, but there was a basket about the size of an Eddie Garrison fitted hat that had every Heinz product known to man, and I was amazed how many different products Heinz makes, but it was awesome. But you won't get that now, will you?
So what do they make? They make mustard and mayo and relish. What else do they make?
Oh, there were like barbecue sauces. There were like several different kinds of barbecue sauce. Like basically, if there's any sort of a condiment in any way, I mean, hell, there might have been motor oil in there. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was like nonstop. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it'll always be Heinz Field. There will always be the ketchup bottle in that one end zone in my mind. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. It's kind of like the RCA Dome, Hoosier Dome. You know, it'll always be, you know, for some people here, you know, when the Colts first moved to town, it's always going to be the Hoosier Dome. But yeah, regardless of what they call it, it's still a great home field advantage.
And the other thing too that's disappointing is now that it's no longer Heinz Field, I can't make my annual joke about the fact that it takes 4.5 hours to get everyone out of the stadium. Here we go. Home style gravy, ketchup, vinegar, mustard, relish, mayo cup mixed sauce, chili sauce, pickle sauce, relish, barbecue sauce. I'm telling you, it's unbelievable. Like just nonstop. And I got them all in one basket. Okay, so let's begin with this.
They don't make ranch? No ranch on there?
There's got to hold on. There's got to be ranch, right? Is that an Indiana thing though? Here's the mustard with like 4 A's mustard. That's a chipotle honey flavor. I mean, it's nonstop. Yeah. Cocktail sauce, turkey gravy. There's got to be ranch in here. Now you got me looking. Now you got me looking. Eddie, can you continue looking, please, at the – how about just the Heinz Worcestershire sauce?
Worcestershire?
Yeah. However you say that,
Some people don't consider ranch a condiment. Some people say ranch is only a dressing. To me, it's a condiment, and quite frankly, it's the most versatile condiment. You know,
yes, they do. They have ranch.
They do?
They got ranch. Okay,
yeah.
All right.
I consider ranch and mayonnaise both to be absolutely horrific and the spawn of the devil, but that's a whole different talk show.
Oh, Jake.
I'm just telling you. Matt, let's begin with this. Trade deadline upcoming. You know, do you anticipate – I don't know that any of us know for certain, and it always takes 2 to tango, right? Do you think that we will see something or hear something between now and the trade deadline?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a really good question because – you know, since Chris Ballard's been here, you know, they haven't been 7-1 at this point, you know, as we get creeping towards the trade deadline. So, you know, not to cop out, but it's kind of like uncharted waters right now. You know what I mean? So, you know, if you were to look at the roster and say, where are some of the upgrades in terms of positions, you know, you can look at corner, you can look at defensive end. But again, like, who are you going to get? Like, I'm just playing devil's advocate. You know what I mean? Like, you know, the top corners aren't going to be on the market. You know, are you going to give up a draft pick for next year when you think you're going to be good again next season, right, in 2026? You know, you're going to give up draft picks to reinforce your roster, you know, next spring. You know, I don't know. Like, if you just get, you know, marginally better or just percentage points better, is it worth doing, you know, based on or compared to, I should say, you know, like some of the guys you've had on this team that know the system, that have been with you every step of the way so far this year, dating back to training camp. You know, I don't know. I'm just playing devil's advocate, but it's going to be fascinating to see, you know, what ends up happening next week because it's next Tuesday, right? I think it's the 4th at 4:00. So, you know, corner, defensive end, you know, these are areas that, you know, the Colts might be looking to possibly upgrade because, you know, they've got a lot of sacks, they got a lot of pressures, but like we've talked about before in the past, you know, you want to see more of those first wave sacks. You want to see more consistency in the sack total, you know, before the fourth quarter when a team on offense that, your opposing team that's trying to get back into the game, down by like 20 points, as was the case last week in the fourth quarter with Tennessee, that's when the sacks have come. You want to see them come, earlier in the game and I would say more significant spots, if you will. But it's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
Where do things stand right now? Matt Taylor, the voice of the Colts, our guest on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Where do things stand right now in terms of health status? The injury report from yesterday, Matt, there were some on there that did not practice yesterday that did surprise me a little bit. But then again, you have to temper that somewhat because you just don't know how much of that is precautionary because it's the beginning of the week as opposed to the end.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, Wednesday is kind of like the day where you want to ease guys back in that are dealing with things from the weekend before. And so you see more DNPs, did not participate on Wednesday than you do on Thursday or Friday as you lead, ramp back up into a weekend, if you will. So, yeah, I mean, yesterday I think the guys you're referring to, like Nick Cross and Josh Downs, Grover Stewart didn't practice yesterday. Anthony Gould didn't practice yesterday. A lot of those guys did come back in some form today. We'll see what the injury report says, when they have a clear designation on them. But they were more visible when the media was out there earlier today. So some guys were back to practice today that didn't practice yesterday that were visible by the media. I think Grover Stewart's probably the biggest one to keep an eye on because we didn't see him today and he didn't practice yesterday. And so we'll see what his designation is later on this afternoon when the injury report comes out. But, he's still, even though Adetomo Adebawore is having a really good year and Neville Gallimore is having a really good year, he's still just, I think, one of the best defensive tackles in the game. And you pair him up with DeForest Buckner, then I think you really have something, which has been the case the last, 3 or 4 years, and those guys have been just in their prime. So you want to have him available on the road in a really big game, big atmosphere in Pittsburgh, ideally going in Sunday.
Matt, one of the things we talked about yesterday, and I know that Gonzalez did not practice because of a family loss, so a personal reason he did not practice. I don't know, and I certainly understand, whether or not that means he's available on Sunday. I think we would all understand if he's not when you have a family member that passes. But we've talked about Daniel Jones. You and I, when you come on, we've talked about this, the offense and the way they're playing and all of it. And I feel like the time is now, and probably we could do it every day, to give the offensive line their flowers because individually speaking, and I wanted you to touch on this, individually, each member of that line not named Quentin Nelson came into a situation where there was reason for them to be questioned. Maybe they were playing a different position than what they played in college. Maybe they were their arms weren't long enough, according to the gurus on draft night, etc. Each one of them had something to prove. Yet collectively as a unit, they are playing as well as about any line we've seen in a long time in this town, and right now as well as anybody in the league. And I'm curious if you have noticed from an individual standpoint just kind of that drive that each of those guys individually has that I'm talking about.
No, I appreciate you bringing those guys up. If you go through them one by one, like you said, outside of Nelson, Ryman was a tight end in college and had a really tough indoctrination into the NFL. Remember that 2022 season? It was kind of rough for him. He had to put on weight and work on his footwork. His first game, I think it was on a Thursday night against Denver, and he had 3 or 4 false starts, a couple holding penalties. It was a very forgettable performance. And now he's rock solid. And then you got the center, Tanner Bortolini, just as recently as, 4 months ago, he was in a battle with Danny Pinter to be the starter at center, and now he's played about 96% of the snaps, and he's one of the most athletic centers in the game and can do a lot of things that other guys can't. You mentioned Matt Gonzalez, losing his dad, and so obviously this is going to be a really trying week and trying time for him, but he's making a position switch as well, going from tackle to guard, and missed most of the end of his last year in college at Pittsburgh, and he seems like he's just killing it right now in the inside of that offensive line. And then Braden Smith going through what he went through last year with his OCD problems and some of the mental health, hurdles that he's dealt with, and he talks openly about those again yesterday. And I think he's just a walking inspiration for not only guys in the locker room, but when people read and hear about his story, he gives a lot of people hope and optimism. And, it's that kicking the stigma, mantra that the Colts and the organization live by. It's okay not to be okay. And he's dealt with those mental demons and has come out on the other side. And so, it's Braden the other day, too, talking about, he's been here since 2018. Nelson's been here since 18. Ryman's been here for, 4 or 5 years now. And this is the closest offensive line togetherness that they've had. I think Tony Sperano deserves a lot of credit for that. But it's just, I think, Nelson and his leadership, they hang out off the field, they go to dinners, but just on the field, most importantly, they're just connected, they're bonded. And I think that matters, and I think that helps, the production. They've only given up, 9 sacks all season? I mean, that's just a tremendous number, and it's helping Daniel Jones, it's helping the rest of the offense. And, those intangibles that don't show up in the box score, like team chemistry, I think that's a huge part of their success up front.
Matt Taylor, the voice of the Colts, is our guest. Java House Peel and Pork guest line. Matt, I'm curious, of the Jim Irsay collection that we now know is going to go up for sale, you're a music guy. You're an old soul, musically speaking. You're going to put in bids for which guitar?
Oh, man, that's great. I mean, anything by Springsteen, anything. I mean, I know he's got the Pink Floyd guitars and the Jimi Hendrix guitars. I mean, it's not hyperbole when people say it is the best guitar collection in the world. And I've seen it like 3 or 4 times, most specifically when the Jim Irsay band would play the kickoff concert, late August, early September before week 1. Got to poke around at it a couple of times then. But to me, it's like being in the equivalent of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I've been to the Rock Hall once, and I could have spent 3 more days there just walking around and appreciating things. So, yeah, without a doubt, that's the coolest part of the collection for me. And it spans so many different things, as we know, right? It's not just music, it's pop culture, it's history, but the guitar collection is probably the highlight of the collection.
So I don't want to get anybody in trouble here, but I don't know the guy's name, so I guess I won't. Matt, Nick Yeoman, right, that I do IndyCar radio with?
Yeah.
So Nick and I, several years ago, were in, I think it was when we were at Mid-Ohio, and we're like, let's go to Cleveland. So we drove to Cleveland, and we're like, let's go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Well, it closes at 6 or whatever, and we get there at like 5:15. This is kind of the story of my life, right? So, and it's not inexpensive, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, $25 or whatever we get in. So we go there, and Nick and I are sitting there debating and discussing whether or not we should pay the full fare to go in and be able to walk through and basically like, oh, look, there's Jim Morrison's Boy Scout uniform. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So while we're doing it, the guy working says, so where are you guys from? And I say, we work radio for IndyCar. We're from Indianapolis. The guy then jolts full of energy and says, I'm the biggest Indianapolis Colts fan known to man, and has to show me his wallet, which is like a Colts wallet, and his keychain, which is a Colts keychain, and his boxers, which are Colts boxers, and then it's uncomfortable. And then he says, if you're from Indy, hell, I ain't charging you. And so we got to go in free. So the Colts got me in free to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, baby.
Did you get to stay later?
Great question. You would have thought it was one of those things where I think it's kind of like when you're at Kroger and they're like, attention shoppers, you got 10 minutes to get up to the front register, please. I think they came over and said, we close in 10 minutes, and we just kind of meandered our way through. And we did not stay well after hours, but we got our money's worth. I'll tell you that much, right?
That's good. Well, there's no doubt about that. Yeah. I mean, that thing's got 7 stories, doesn't it? I mean, it may have changed since I last been there. It's been a while.
The problem I have with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is I'm like, let's just call it what it is at this point. It's the Music Hall of Fame, right? There's nothing about Bob Marley that says rock and roll, right?
Yes and no. I see your point, but rock and roll it's like a rock and roll. It's like a melting pot. It's the
Fair.
evolution of gospel and rock and funk and soul and R&B. So I mean, all of those things kind of pipe into rock and roll.
And I don't even know, is Dolly Parton in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
I don't know.
You know what I mean? Or, like country music. I mean, it's to me, again, I get it. I mean, if there is one genre of music that you would say is the most all-encompassing, perhaps rock and roll is the term, right? But maybe it's an age thing, too. I still think of rock and roll as meaning like from Bill Haley and the Comets through classic rock, and then that's it. Which leads to this last question, Matt.
She was, by the way, in November of 22.
Okay. Do you believe, Matt, that classic rock is defined simply as music that is, say, 40 years old, regardless of the time frame in which you are using the term? Or does classic rock simply mean music produced from 1968 to 1980?
I think it's probably more of like what you said, like a time period. Like mid 60s to early 80s.
So Nirvana, because they are now, that debut album is nearly 35 years old. It does not quantify as classic rock, correct?
In my opinion, no. But that being said, I think it's hard to argue that nowadays, because I think the rock and roll or the classic rock format, and I could be wrong about this because I don't listen to like Q95 or 104.5 on the reg, as they say, as the kids say, but it just seems like I'm hearing more of like Nirvana and the Red Hot Chili Peppers more than I did, 15 years ago.
Well, I mean, one of the more somber moments of my life is when I was talking to a college person and I said something like, when I was in college, Nirvana and Pearl Jam were huge, and they said to me, "Oh yeah, dude, I love all the old classic rock." I'm like, yeah. Okay.
and then you punched him in the mouth. Yeah, I love it.
I was like, well, okay. Yeah, we could have stopped there. All right, Steelers and Colts on Sunday. Matt, we will be listening and certainly enjoy the trip over and safe travels, all right?
All right, guys. I appreciate you.
Matt Taylor, the voice of the Colts. We'll come back. JMV is on remote. I believe he's at the Ale Emporium. Is that the Castleton location, Eddie?
Castleton location,
and
indeed.
The Hermanaki wings are fabulous up there. We will throw it out to John. We'll do it as part of the crossover. Brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air. Love-HVAC.com is the website. 317-353-2141, the telephone number. sheets. That includes handwritten lyrics and notes from Paul McCartney about this song, Hey Jude, is included in the Irsay collection. Again, up for now, will eventually go up for auction. That announcement earlier today. J&B is at Ale Emporium up in Castleton. And, John, I love it because Ryan's up there hanging out with you, right? Yes. Yeah, the original sheet it's actually I could make my own joke about it being 2 sheets of paper and not one, but I'll just leave it at that. How's that? Man, I'm telling you, I did not realize the depth of the collection, to be honest with you. I mean, the stuff that is there, it's pretty impressive, right? Pretty impressive.
Yeah, there is no doubt about it, Jake. It is. And hey, shout out to Ryan Stoltz, as you mentioned, too. He is in the house for you. Hey, Jake, I was curious, how long, every time Miles Turner says anything, like I got to answer for it. Hey, what's up, Denny Smith? Why is that? How long is this going to be? What's the statute of limitations on me having to answer to everything every time he goes on some really crappy basketball playing hangers-on Little Brothers podcast?
What's the length of time that you defended him on the radio?
8 years, 7 years.
So there you go.
I could tell you this. When he was made fun of for doing yoga in the off season, that's when I started. Remember, he did yoga.
Now, he was a Lego guy too, right?
Yes, yoga and Lego.
Yeah, they're probably.
So, hey, and let's be clear, and I think you're probably on the same page with me. I don't give 2 craps for what he does, what he doesn't do, what happens to him, and if he gets his ass whipped, he gets his ass whipped. I just have always hated about how he left and how, because I know he's pissed, obviously, at the front office, right? I mean, he's mad at them because they lowballed him. Okay, but don't talk junk about the guys that carried your rear end most of the time. And the reason why he was any good at all was because of Tyrese Halliburton. The reason why he was any good between Tyrese Halliburton and Rick Carlisle coming here and getting rid of Nate Bjorkgren in the stand of the corner offense and shipping off Sabonis, that was the reason why he was good. So
I understand. Listen, I understand his reasoning for ending up in Milwaukee for certain, right? And I think he was an important. I think he was an important piece here for sure. But I also understand why fans would be upset at his departure because it leaves you wondering and guessing what could have been. You know what I mean? That's just the reality of it. What's lined up on the big show today, John?
We got our Larceny Bourbon Locks, Luna's with Tequila Shots. It is the day before Halloween at the legendary Ale Emporium. We're in Castleton, Jake, today. We'd love to see you. We have the John Griffin retirement party here. Denny Smith rode in on his gyrocopter.
I was going to say, did he fly his plane in?
Yeah, and I didn't know. I knew it was like a costume day going on downtown with our stations. John Griffin, oddly enough, dressed up as Thomas Jefferson in a sweater.
That's beautiful. But speaking of which,
wait a minute, I'm sorry. Hey, Jake, is that just his hair in general, I think, every day?
Speaking of which, there are letters from Thomas Jefferson in the Irsay collection, by the way, that you two can purchase.
Really?
If you so, yeah, for real.
If we had a $30 bill, John Griffin would be on it.
You know, if there's a $30 bill at the end of the day at the Ale Emporium, John Griffin walks away, probably, right? But that's
wait a minute, there's Dave the King Wilson's in here. Oh my goodness!
All right, John, we'll throw it out to you shortly. All right, it's a cast of characters at Ale Emporium, and John will be there until 6, and we will be back with you at noon tomorrow. I thank you for listening to Query & Company.